For thousands of years of human seafaring, millions of ships have crossed the world's oceans. But unfortunately, not all of them reached their destination. Some ships sank along with billions worth of treasures. There were also ships that disappeared without any survivors to tell what happened. And there were ships that were only found hundreds of years later. While most of the missing ships still remain a mystery up to now, from a ship full of gold that caused a major economic crisis to a ghost ship that wandered the Arctic for almost 4 decades. In this video, we will discuss the most mysterious and most astonishing shipwrecks ever found in history. But before we start the discussion, I would like to ask you for a like and please subscribe to our channel. This is a huge help for us content creators. So let's get started. Number 15 on our list is the SS Central America. There are ships that sank where not only lives were lost, but also a huge amount of treasure. One of the most famous examples of this is the SS Central America. This was a steamship that played an important role in people's journeys during the California Gold Rush. This ship was launched in 1852. Its main job was to transport passengers and cargo between the eastern part of the United States and Panama. Back then, there was no Panama Canal yet, so many travelers had to pass through Panama first before heading to California. But it wasn't just passengers that this ship carried. It often transported gold from the mines of California as well. In September 1857, the SS Central America set sail carrying a huge cargo of gold. It was estimated that there were more than 3 tons of gold inside, along with many passengers and crew members. While at sea near the eastern coast of the United States, the ship encountered a powerful hurricane. For several days, huge waves battered the ship nonstop. Because of this, the ship's engines gradually broke down, and water began to seep in. The crew tried to save the ship, but the situation kept getting worse. By September 1857, the crew's situation had become dire. They tried to save the ship, but the situation kept getting worse. By September 1857, the crew's situation had become dire. When the crew tried to save it, the situation only got worse. By 1857, the crew's situation had become dire. By September, the crew and the ship were in a dire situation. In 1857, the situation only got worse for the crew and the ship. However, when the ship sank, it fell more than 2,000 meters deep into the sea. Because of this, it could not be found for many decades. It wasn't until 1988 that a group of explorers found the wreck using modern deep-sea technology. When they examined the site, they discovered one of the largest treasures from a shipwreck. Thousands of gold coins, gold bars, and other valuable items were recovered from the depths of the ocean. To this day, the SS Central America is still known as one of the most famous lost treasure ships in history. Number 14, Endurance. Not all famous shipwrecks carried treasure. Some became symbols of human resilience and survival in one of the harshest places on Earth. One of these is the Endurance. The Endurance was a ship used by the explorer Ernest Shackleton on his expedition to Antarctica in 1914. Their goal was to make a historic journey and cross Antarctica, but their plan did not go ahead. When they arrived at the icy waters of the Weddell Sea, the ship was surrounded by thick ice. At first, they still hoped it would break free, but as time went on, the ice pressed tighter and tighter against the ship. It was like a crusher slowly squeezing the hull of the Endurance. They were trapped for months in the middle of the frozen sea. As time passed, the hull of the ship began to crack and break apart because of the immense pressure from the ice. In October 1915, Shackleton was forced to order the abandonment of the ship. They took the essential equipment and lifeboats before the Endurance finally sank. Amazingly, even though they lost their ship, the entire crew survived after an extremely difficult rescue journey that is now recognized as one of the greatest survival stories in history. After the Endurance sank, its exact location was also lost for more than a century. Many expeditions had tried to find it, but failed until 2022 when it was found on the floor of the Antarctic Ocean. It lies at a depth of almost 3,000 meters, and because the area is protected and extremely difficult to reach, it will likely remain resting under the sea for generations to come. Number 13. The Hunley. Before modern submarines existed, a small vessel had already shown that underwater combat was possible. This is the Hunley. It was built during the American Civil War and was one of the very first submarines to see real combat at sea. This vessel was very small. It was only about 12 meters long. Only 8 people needed to get inside, and it didn't have an engine like submarines do today. Instead, the crew manually turned the crankshaft to run its propeller. It was cramped, hot, and very hard to move inside. But despite this, it became part of a historic operation. Hunley's main weapon was an explosive charge attached to a long pole at the front of the submarine. It needed to approach the target, attach the explosive, and then detonate it. In February 1864, it successfully attacked a Union Navy warship. This was the first time in history that a submarine was able to sink an enemy ship in actual warfare. But after that victory, the Hunley never returned. It suddenly disappeared in the ocean, along with its entire crew. The biggest question is why it sank. There are theories that it may have been affected by its own explosion. Some say there was a problem inside the submarine. Others believe that water entered it while they were returning to their enemy. But until now, there is still no single answer that has been fully proven. In 1995, Hunley was found again after being missing for more than 100 years. And in 2000, it was successfully raised from the bottom of the sea. Because of this, historians learned even more about the first submarines in history. But even though the actual wreck is now in the hands of experts, the most important mystery still remains. What really happened to Hunley on that triumphant night? How did it manage to carry out the first submarine attack in the world? Number 12. The luxury ship that couldn't survive one mistake. There are ships that were made to be symbols of beauty, wealth, and modern technology. But sometimes, no matter how advanced a ship is, a single mistake can lead to a huge tragedy. One of the best examples of this is the Andrea Doria. In the 1950s, it was one of Italy's most celebrated passenger ships. It was like a floating luxury hotel in the middle of the sea, with elegant dining rooms, a swimming pool, and interiors filled with Italian art. For many passengers back then, boarding it was already part of the vacation itself. But in July 1956, as it was approaching New York after traveling from Europe, everything suddenly changed. The fog was thick over the ocean that night. Because visibility was almost zero, it was crucial to use the radar correctly and accurately estimate the movement of other ships. Unfortunately, the Andrea Doria crossed paths with a Swedish passenger ship called Stockholm. The collision was extremely violent. The sturdy bow of the Stockholm struck the side of the Andrea Doria and left a huge hole in its hull. Water quickly entered inside. The ship gradually tilted until it became difficult to use many of its lifeboats. Despite this, the evacuation of most of the passengers went smoothly. Nearby ships also helped and quickly responded to the emergency. After a few hours, one of the most beautiful ships of its time finally sank. After the incident, many investigations were conducted. Experts examined the use of radar, the speed of the ships, and even the design of the compartments that were supposed to prevent water from entering. But until now, there is still no single reason considered as the sole cause of the disaster.
Sa kasalukuyan
This remains the wreck of Andrea Doria on the Atlantic Ocean floor. Because of the strong currents and the gradual deterioration of the ship, many divers consider it as one of the most dangerous shipwreck dive sites in the world. Number 11. The ship that answered Titanic's final call. Before it sank in its own tragedy, it first became part of one of the most famous rescue missions in history. This is the RMS Carpathia. In April 1912, while the Titanic was sinking in the icy North Atlantic, the Carpathia was one of the ships that received the distress signal. Even though it was still far from the site of the disaster, it immediately changed course and rushed to help. According to historical records, it was able to reach the site and rescue hundreds of survivors from the Titanic. Because of this, the name Carpathia became associated with one of the most important rescue operations in maritime history. But after a few years, its own tragedy came. When the First World War came, the ship was used for the needs of the British government. At that time, the seas were not safe because of German submarines that were patrolling and attacking ships allied with Britain. In July 1918, while in the Atlantic Ocean, the German submarine U-55 spotted the Carpathia. Several torpedoes were launched against it. After being hit, it quickly surfaced. The situation was dire. Not long after, the ship eventually sank. For many decades, its wreck remained hidden under the sea. When it was discovered in 1999, researchers learned more details about the ship's final moments. But above all, the world once again remembered the ship that once rescued survivors from the Titanic. Number 10. The warship that changed naval history. Some ships are famous for their size, others are known for their wealth. But this ship became famous because it changed the way wars were fought at sea. This is the USS Monitor. During the early years of the American Civil War, most warships were still made of wood, but the engineer John Erickson believed there was a better way. So he designed the USS Monitor. At first glance, it looked unusual right away. Its hull sat low in the water, and it was almost entirely protected by iron. But the most important part was its rotating turret. Inside it were the main cannons. Instead of turning the whole ship to aim at the enemy, you could just rotate the turret itself. Now, this is standard on warships, but at that time it was a huge innovation. In March 1862, the USS Monitor faced the CSS Virginia in a historic battle. This was the first time that two ironclad warships faced each other in real combat. Although there was no clear winner, the battle showed that the era of wooden warships was coming to an end. A new era of iron and modern engineering had begun. But even though its design was very advanced, the Monitor still had weaknesses. It was not good in rough seas and bad weather. In December 1862, it encountered a severe storm while at sea near North Carolina. When the ship could no longer withstand the conditions, it eventually sank along with some of its crew. It was missing for more than a century before it was rediscovered in 1973. Since then, many parts of the ship have been recovered and studied, and with every artifact recovered from the sea, historians gain a better understanding of how modern naval warfare began, which is still used by many countries today. Number 9. The Arctic ship that vanished without a trace. For many years, this was one of the greatest mysteries in the history of navigation. Two ships, more than 100 people, and an expedition that seemed to be swallowed by the frozen world of the Arctic. One of those ships was the HMS Terror. In the early 1800s, the HMS Terror was built as a warship for the British Royal Navy. It was built to be sturdy because it was originally designed to carry heavy mortars used against coastal fortifications, but eventually it would face a much greater mission, the Arctic. During those times, there were still many parts of the northern seas that had not yet been explored by humans. Many countries were searching for a faster sea route that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Britain was one of the leading countries in this search. Because of the durability of the HMS Terror, it was chosen to join several expeditions to the Arctic. It proved that it could survive extreme ice conditions and intense cold, but its most important mission came in 1845. Together with its sister ship, the HMS Erebus, the HMS Terror was sent under the command of Sir John Franklin to search for the remaining parts of the Northwest Passage. Everyone was confident before they left. They brought modern equipment for that time. The ships were reinforced for ice and even equipped with steam engines to help with navigation. But after they reached the Arctic, they suddenly disappeared. No one returned. No one could explain what really happened. For many decades, Britain sent various rescue and search expeditions. Little by little, they found traces of the expedition. There were equipment camps, and evidence showing that the crew suffered greatly from the extreme cold and lack of food. But the ships themselves could not be found. It wasn't until almost a century and a half later, in 2014 and 2016, that search teams found HMS Erebus and HMS Terror under the sea in the northern part of Canada. Because of the cold waters of the Arctic, many parts of the ships remained intact compared to other shipwrecks in the world. Their discovery helped historians better understand how difficult Arctic expeditions were during a time when there was no modern technology. Number 8, the warship that sank in front of an entire nation. Some ships sink in the middle of a storm, others disappear in distant seas. But the Mary Rose sank while being watched by many people. What's even more surprising is that this happened in the middle of a battle where it was expected to keep fighting. The Mary Rose was one of the most important warships of England during the time of King Henry VIII. In the 16th century, it was one of the most powerful weapons of the English Navy. It carried heavy artillery. It was armed with cannons and designed to fight enemy ships at sea. For many years, it was part of various military campaigns of England. But on July 1545, the day came when its service would end. While the English fleet was preparing to face the French ships, the Mary Rose suddenly tilted. Just moments later, it quickly filled with water and sank. Everything happened in front of many witnesses. Because of this, questions immediately arose. What was the real cause? Some historians believe that water may have entered through the open gun ports as the ship was turning. Others say that the weight of the weapons and equipment inside may have been a problem. There are also theories about strong winds or mistakes made by the crew. But until now, there is still no single answer that has been fully proven. It lay at the bottom of the sea for more than 400 years. Then it was rediscovered in 1971. In 1982, it was successfully salvaged in one of the largest marine archaeology projects in history. Thousands of sailors' belongings were found inside. There were weapons, work tools, and personal belongings. Because of this, historians had the rare opportunity to see how ordinary crew members lived during the Tudor period in England. Number 7, the Navy ship that disappeared overnight. Sometimes you don't need deep oceans for a mystery to happen. Sometimes it's enough for a ship to leave the port and never be seen again. That's what happened to the USS Conestoga. It wasn't a big battleship. It wasn't a luxury liner either. It was just a sturdy tugboat used for towing, rescue operations, and other important jobs at sea. During the World War I, the USS Conestoga was purchased. This was to help with various military operations. After the war, it remained in service in different parts of America. Everything seemed normal until March 1921, when the USS Conestoga left California for a long voyage to American Samoa. But it never reached its destination. It didn't return either. It just suddenly disappeared. Because there was no clear information, the U.S. Navy conducted a massive search. Many ships and aircraft joined the operation, but nothing was found. As the years went by, speculations grew. Some said it might have broken down. Some said it might have experienced a serious accident at sea, but there was no solid evidence. Its disappearance remained a mystery for almost a century. Then in 2016, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that they had found the wreck of the USS Conestoga. It was near Farallon Island in California. Based on the investigation, it appears that it possibly encountered a strong storm just a few hours after leaving the port. Then, when it was announced by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, there was still something that continued to catch the attention of the researchers. The ship was found very far from the course it was supposed to be taking. This means that something happened during the first hours of its voyage that, until now, is still not fully understood. After the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced they had found the wreck of the Conestoga, there were still questions about the final moments of the ship Conestoga, which once disappeared without a trace in the ocean. Number 6, the warship that sunk before reaching battle. Sometimes the greatest embarrassment at sea doesn't come from the enemy. Sometimes it comes from your own mistakes. That's what happened to Vasa. The Vasa was built to showcase the power of Sweden in the 1600s. It was not an ordinary ship. It was big, beautiful, and full of decorations. There were carvings of the king, symbols of power, and religious scenes. It was like a floating message to other countries, saying that Sweden was strong. But behind its beauty, there was a big problem. The ship's body was too tall. The upper part was too heavy, and because there were so many cannons placed here, the ship became unbalanced. On August 10, 1628, it sailed out of Stockholm Harbor for the first time. Many people were watching. They were expecting to see the new symbol of the Swedish nation. But only a few minutes had passed. The wind hit its sails. The ship tilted. After that, water entered through the open cannon ports. It couldn't recover anymore. The Vasa quickly sank on its very first voyage. It wasn't defeated in battle. It wasn't blown up by the enemy. It sank because the design didn't have enough stability. For more than 300 years, it remained underwater. Because the water in Stockholm is cold, a large part of the ship was preserved. In 1961, the Vasa was salvaged almost completely intact. Now on display at the Vasa Museum in Stockholm, what was once a symbol of strength now reminds us that even the most beautiful project will fail if its foundation is flawed. Number 5. This is still the treasure ship. During the age of exploration, Portugal was one of the strongest maritime nations. Their ships carried goods, metals, money, and other valuable items to different parts of Europe. One of these ships was the Santo Antonio. It was a Portuguese merchant ship that traveled from Lisbon to Antwerp. It carried valuable cargo such as copper, silver, cloth, weapons, and other items important for trade. But on January 19th, 1527, it didn't finish its journey. While at sea near Cornwall, England, it encountered bad weather. Its anchor reportedly broke, and the people on board tried to bring the ship closer to shore. But instead of being saved, it hit a dangerous part of the coast. That's where the ship started to break apart. Many died, and the survivors were left in the middle of chaos. But the story here isn't just about the storm. Because the cargo was valuable, people quickly got involved. Some locals took items from the wreck. There were also authorities who wanted to get the cargo. Because of this, it became a major legal dispute. It was no longer just a simple shipwreck. It became a matter of wealth, ownership, and power. After many centuries, divers and archaeologists studied the site again. Evidence was found that helps us better understand how important this ship was to trade during that time. But there are still questions. Was the storm really the only reason for the sinking? Was the cargo too heavy? Or did something else happen before it was completely destroyed? Until now, the Santo Antonio is not just the story of a sunken ship. It's also the story of a time when the sea was the main route to wealth, danger, and power. Number 4, the ghost ship that refused to sink. There are ships that disappear because they sink. But there's one ship with a much scarier story, because after the crew abandoned it, it didn't sink right away. It continued to wander in the Arctic without anyone on board. This is the SS Baichimo. This ship was used for the fur trade in the northern part of Canada. It delivered supplies to remote communities and collected animal furs from traders. It was built to be sturdy because it needed to withstand ice and extreme cold. But in 1931, it got trapped in thick ice near Alaska. At first, the crew waited for the ice to break so they could leave, but the weather only got worse. So they left the ship for a while and set up camp in a safer place. After a strong blizzard, the SS Baichimo disappeared from their sight. They thought it had sunk, but it hadn't. After a few days, the ship was seen again, floating in another place. The crew was even able to retrieve some of its cargo, but they could no longer save the ship itself. They thought that was the end. But that's where the stranger part of the story began. In the following years, people kept seeing the SS Baichimo in the Arctic. Sometimes it got trapped in ice. Sometimes it was floating in the sea. There were people who tried to board or claim the ship, but because of the cold, ice, and dangerous conditions, they were never able to fully control it. The last confirmed sighting of it was in 1969. That means it was seen in the Arctic for almost 40 years after it was abandoned. After that, it disappeared. No one knows if it sank. No one knows if it was crushed by the ice. And because the Arctic is so vast, there's a small possibility that its remains are still out there somewhere, quietly buried in the ice. That's why until now the SS Baichimo is known as one of the most famous ghost ships in history. Number 3, the shipwreck in the middle of a desert. Usually shipwrecks are found under the sea, but there's one ship that seems to be in the wrong place. This is the Edward Bolen. In 1909, while traveling near the skeleton coast of Namibia, it got stuck in the shallow part of the sea because of thick fog and the dangerous coastline. The people on board were able to get out safely, but the ship was left behind. As the years went by, the sea gradually receded and the desert expanded. Because of this, the ship that was once by the shore ended up amid the sand. Now, it is hundreds of meters away from the current coastline. Because of the dry climate of the Namib Desert, a large part of the wreck remains visible to this day. That's why it's one of the most unique shipwrecks in the world. A sea vessel that seems to have gotten lost and ended up in the middle of the desert. Number 2, the treasure ship, worth billions. If there's one shipwreck that's often called the Holy Grail by treasure hunters, it's the San Jose. This was a Spanish galleon that sank in 1708 while carrying a huge treasure from South America. On its way to Spain, it encountered British warships near the coast of Colombia. In the middle of the battle, there was a massive explosion inside the ship. It quickly sank along with the gold, silver, and precious gems it was carrying. For more than 300 years, the world did not know where the ship was, until Colombia found it in 2015. But the story didn't end there, because even now there is still debate over who has the right to the treasure inside it. Colombia claims it. Spain also claims it. And there are also groups saying that some of those treasures came from Spain's colonies in South America. So the biggest mystery of the San Jose now is no longer about where it can be found, but rather who truly has the right to the billions of dollars still lying under the sea. Number 1, the oldest shipwreck ever found. Even before many ancient empires were built, there were already people sailing and trading across the sea. The Dokos shipwreck is proof of this. It was found near the small island of Dokos in Greece and is considered by many archaeologists as one of the oldest shipwrecks ever discovered in the world. It is estimated to have sunk more than 4,000 years ago during the Bronze Age. When the area was studied, researchers found a large number of pottery pieces, everyday items, and stone anchors. These items show that there was already organized trade between different communities even thousands of years ago. Even though almost none of the ship's wood remains, the artifacts it left behind are still very important. Because of this, historians better understand how people lived, traveled, and traded in ancient times. And even though we already know where it sank, there are questions that will probably never be answered. Who were the people who owned it? What exactly happened during their voyage? And what is the full story of this ship that has been lying at the bottom of the sea for more than 4,000 years?